J.J. McCarthy right in the mix for a lot of teams tonight, one of them being the Broncos, and that's where we find Ed Werder covering Denver. Ed, any sense where you think they're going to head tonight?
Well, first of all, the Broncos have not been in the W column very often in the last 5 years. And in fact, they've started 13 different quarterbacks since Peyton Manning retired. Somewhere in the first round tonight, Sean Payton could certainly draft Denver's next franchise quarterback. I've spent the past few days with this team, and my sense is that the Broncos, like most teams, expect Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and probably Drake May to be the first 3 picks. J.J. McCarthy, rather than May as the third quarterback off the board, would be a potential surprise. Another question here, and the one that likely determines whether the Broncos or Vikings try to trade up, is how seriously are the Giants considering a quarterback at 6? If convinced that's a real possibility, then teams like Denver and Minnesota would have to trade up into the top 5. The Broncos have engaged potential trade partners considering moves both up and down. I know that for a fact. It's worth mentioning that Sean Payton made 4 draft day trades in the first round while with the Saints. All 4 would require a higher pick. He also twice made pre-draft trades to obtain a first-round pick. The Saints never traded down in the first round while Peyton was in New Orleans. An important distinction to make, of course, regarding to all of that, is that the Saints were a perennial playoff team. They were confident they were surrendering future first-round picks that would be in the late 20s, not the situation here in Denver where Peyton prepares for his second season rebuilding the roster. And Laura, I really think there's a strong feeling here in the building the Broncos can stay at 12 and draft an impact player. Maybe it'd be one of the second-tier quarterbacks, Bo Nix or Michael Penix, both of whom have made very favorable impressions on the scouts and coaches here.
Yeah, you got to think there's a fit in that system potentially, especially maybe for Bo Nix. Thanks to Ed Werder for doing that. Also, Peyton Manning told a great story, you guys, about texting J.J. McCarthy, and J.J. thought it was a joke, and so he didn't respond, and Peyton's like, yo, man, it's actually me. So he had a good conversation with J.J. McCarthy.
That happened to me when Ryan Clark texted me for the first time. Like, no way. No way.
It's not actually you.
Phil, just how hard is it to figure out what Denver's going to do tonight?
I think they're the hardest team in the first half of the draft forecast right now for this reason. I think there is a chance they could take a quarterback at pick number 12, but I think there are also some people that feel like that would be a little bit too early for one of those quarterbacks, especially if it is Bo Nix, despite the potential system fit. The other part of it is this. If they don't take a quarterback at number 12, I would argue that left tackle, potential need. Garrett Bowles going into the final year of his contract. Cornerback, edge rusher, wide receiver with Cortland Sutton, his future a bit uncertain right now in Denver. And all of those positions, by the way, have a player that you could justify taking 12th overall. So do you draft for need? Do you draft for value? If it's a quarterback, more often than not, we know the teams end up drafting for need. It's why I've had a really hard time, though, deciding which direction they'll go.
The Broncos have one of 2 decisions that they could potentially make. Go up and go get the quarterback that they desire more than maybe Bo Nix, and that's obviously going to weaken your football team. So you have that choice of lesser assets and talent more than likely and a potential player off your roster, but I got a quarterback, or roll the dice a little bit and don't take a quarterback in the first round. Maybe someone else comes up and grabs a pick, and you trade back and gets a picks, and you sit towards the second or third round. They don't have a second rounder, but maybe you acquire one and you take a Spencer Rattler or a Jordan Travis out of Florida State. And that's the question, is like, do you want maybe another pick or 2 in Rattler and or Jordan Travis, or do you want another pick or less and Bo Nix? I don't think either of them are great spots.
Without a second-round pick, $85 million between this year and next on Russell Wilson's salary cap charge as well. This is a pickle for the Denver Broncos right now. But one thing we know about Sean Payton is that last year, he said this team expects to play for the playoffs right away. So, like, their idea, like, taking a step back might be a pragmatic approach right now. This might be the long view stage of this franchise rebuild. They're not.
They have to take a step back.
Well, but in his mind, they won't, right?
There is no step forward for this team, especially when you think about the way that Dan laid that out. If you move up and you get a quarterback, you're still getting a rookie quarterback. You're going to lose assets and maybe players. If you stay in that position and you draft one of these quarterbacks that are second-tier guys, it's going to take some time for them to become players that makes people around them better. I think this is a tough spot to be in for Denver.
It's also interesting to see what the Raiders do tonight when we talk about these teams that need quarterbacks but are kind of in a pickle. Mina, what do you think they should do?
I think Michael Penix Jr. makes all the sense in the world for the Raiders. And I think a lot of folks associated them because it just feels like the right fit in Penix Jr. They're getting a guy who can play immediately, which is something they need. They need a quarterback not who's going to come back and sit and develop. No, they need someone who can compete to be the starter. Somebody who's going to attack downfield, throws beautiful deep balls outside the numbers, allows the playmakers to win, and of course the Raiders actually have those, most notably in Devontae Adams, but also Jacoby Myers. I think they map, I've mentioned this before, I think they map on eerily well to the Washington wide receivers. They're like the NFL version of them in a way. So to me, that is one of the more natural quarterback team pairings in the entire draft.
Yeah, and I think that's why Penix fits there, but for Penix is how much do we go need over value at spot 13. Do we feel like at 13 it doesn't matter if we have a lower grade on Penix and you pay the quarterback tax? Or do you try to play a little peekaboo, see if you can draft it, get a good player there, move up late in the first round and pick up Michael Penix? The thing they can't do is miss on a quarterback totally, because if they don't, everything they've done to build around Antonio Pierce will be for naught.
I gotta tell you one thing. I hate the term when someone else uses it of it factor. In part because I don't think it's one of those things that you can actually believe until you spend time around somebody. Senior Bowl, Michael Penix was down there for the week, went to his pro day at Washington, didn't see him obviously play a game that counted. He's got the it factor. He sold me during those two exposures. And every single player at the Senior Bowl, 120 or so of the best players in the country that are draft eligible, all were looking at Michael Penix Jr. kind of like, he's the dude for that week. Wouldn't surprise me if he made that same impression during visits with teams.
And the last thing is this, and Mina mentioned having Caleb Williams on the pivot. We asked him who was the number 2 to him, and he said Michael Penix. Wow. He said he can absolute spin it, and he said, I tell everyone when I'm asked that I believe Michael Penix is the next best quarterback in this draft.
Controls the ball.
You gotta think when he's in those meetings, he's making that impression, and you hear that from a lot of teams. They're very high on him. Could be dicey for the Raiders to wait and see if he's still there. Wait. What is a team, whoever takes him, getting in him tonight?
Yeah, the 3 most important traits a wide receiver needs. Number 1, can you get open? Number 2, do you catch it? And then number 3, what do you do when you actually do catch it? I think he's elite, top 5 in all of those elements. The ability to, the pace of his routes and the play speed that he has. He's not just a one-trick pony. You can get him the football in multiple different facets. We've talked about that with Malik Neighbors, the one-on-one catches. His feet are so unique. Like, we're in Detroit, Nate Burleson, toe drag swag. Like, his ability to have his feet proper in the catch space or at the top of his routes, I think is a thing that he does better than the other 2 in the top 3 category. He's a very rare talent.
All right, so you look at that 4th overall pick with the Cardinals. Look at this tweet from Kyler Murray that he put out a little bit earlier today. He said, the vibes just feel right. Something about today feels right. Vibes are immaculate. I don't know. What does Kyler know here? I mean, you got to think they feel really confident, those Cardinals.
They're the best place in the draft.
4, right. And they do. They've got a lot of great picks as well. But either way, they know it's probably going to be quarterback 1, 2, 3. They're right there. Yeah. They could get Marvin Harrison Jr. All right, so if he's the first wideout to go, that leaves Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze as the next 2 on people's boards. Mina, how do you expect that to go? How do you choose between them? It's like choosing between 2 kids.
The top 3 are all like that for me.
But who you are has to matter, right, as a team?
Is exactly what I was about to say. I have a slight preference for Neighbors generally because of his rare explosiveness, but I think if you do take him over Odunze, you have to have a plan. It's not like, and I would say Marvin Harrison Jr. is in this bucket as well. You just line him outside, tell him to win. Right. That's not what you're doing with Malik Neighbors. You want to borrow heavily from what we see, frankly, the Dolphins do. Condensed formations, using motions. You need to get him in space because when he is in space, bad things happen to the defense. However, that team has to have that vision for him. He's going to play a lot in the slot. He just is, especially earlier on in his career. And if you don't have that vision, take Odunze because he is a sure thing to me.
Yeah, I know the vision is important, and I'm going to differ a little bit here with Mina because I think when we're talking about skill set, 1 and 2 are closer than 2 and 3 to me. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't believe Rome Odunze is a number 1 or that Rome Odunze isn't a really good receiver, but some of the elite traits of the other 2 I don't believe he has. I don't believe he has a little bit of the suddenness, a little bit of the quickness to create some of the separation that we see the elite wide receivers do in the NFL. But we've seen that from both Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors. And I think the thing that Rome does, and Dan was mentioning this during the commercial, is he makes these tough catches because he doesn't create the separation, the range that he could catch the football with, how soft his hands are, the way he places his body. And there is a place in football for that because we've seen it with DeAndre Hopkins as well. Yeah. But when I think about Malik Neighbors, the NFL, that's where they're moving. Right? They're moving to more motion offense. You're moving to the play action pass. You're moving to getting the football out of my quarterback's hands as quickly as I possibly can and letting these players who catch the football in this open space do the work. And I believe Malik does that better than anybody else in this draft.
I just think, like, where it matters. Like, if you're the Giants and you don't get the quarterback, and it's Marvin at 4 or something, both are downfield, but I think I choose Rome Odunze over Neighbors just because of the big body for Daniel Jones. 7 at Tennessee, I think they take offensive linemen, but Brian Callahan comes from the Jamar Chase one-on-one. So maybe is that Malik Neighbors. 9, Chicago. We just talked about, if they're going to take a receiver and stay, I would do Neighbors because get the ball to Caleb's hands more than Rome. And then the Jets, I think that opposite Gary Wilson, if they take a wide receiver, it makes more sense for a Romo Odunze.
I agree with that.